welcome to the Data Science Speaker Series at the University of San Francisco, sponsored by the Data Institute. The Data Institute is the umbrella organization for all things data science at the University of San Francisco. Our speakers today are Flavia Malipali, Senior Data Science Manager at Grammarly, formerly with Nextdoor, Microsoft, and other major organizations, alongside Haiwan, formerly with Nextdoor, LinkedIn, Meta, and others, in management and director roles. Not only do they bring decades of combined experience to the table, but they also co-host the YouTube channel and podcast, Data Neighborhood Podcast, where they dive into everything from career breakthroughs in data science to the latest trends in AI innovation. So I want you all to be sure to check out their channel for inspiring interviews, practical tips, and candid conversations that can help propel your career forward. Today, they'll be talking about what sets data science candidates apart in the eyes of hiring managers. Please join me in welcoming them.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks Victor for having us here today, and welcoming. So we're gonna have a you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. We're gonna have probably a 30-minute or so presentation. So this is gonna be probably a little bit different than the presentations that you guys have seen. These are actually insights and points based on our guests in our podcast. So the format is going to be a little bit here, which is this presentation actually synthesizes a lot of our guests who are industry veterans. Like they span from directors level, senior director level to individual contributors across all data organizations, all data functions, and we're simply distilling all of that into a presentation that hopefully you guys will find value for, and we'll go from there. Sound good? All right. So Victor did an intro. So yeah, my name is Hai, or I guess forgot to put the names here. Hi, this is Shravya. Yeah, we worked in many different Silicon Valley companies across the years. And yeah, we run a podcast on YouTube called Data Neighbor. So go check it out, subscribe. We release episodes every week. And it is, we talk to many different people. And these are, again, actual people that's been in the field for a long time, and we try to keep up with the latest trends and also things around how do you break into the field, how do you thrive in the field, what people are looking for, that kind of stuff. We don't have lessons on how to use PyTorch or how to code exposure transformers or anything like that. There's plenty of other material for that. We just want to bring transparency to the practical stuff that you should be expecting when you actually get into the profession. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think when I was graduating out of my master's, what I wanted to get access to as a student is something that, we try to bring in, not just for students, even when I was younger and in my profession as data scientist. What are the things I didn't look into or I thought were totally underrated skills that I never knew. As we grew into profession, me and I, we actually worked together in Nextdoor. So we thought this should be out there, like for younger people when they're just getting started, not learn it 10 years into the industry and, figure out, oh, I would have known this before. So that's our major reason why we wanted to do this on YouTube so that people get access to it. And just started 2 months ago. So we are learning as well on how the content's done and how do we, do all of this. But yeah.
Cool. And if you have any follow-up questions about anything, if you come across a video and you're like, hey, I really want this question answered, just drop them in the video itself. We reply to every single one. Okay, so getting right into the chase. So 5 key insights. So here are 5 things, literally 5 things, very common across all the guests that we talk to in terms of what they all value, and us agreeing as well. We've hired many people in the past, probably upwards of thousands of candidates that I've spoken to, probably like hundreds or
Yeah.
thousands of you.
Yeah, close to 1,000 maybe. Yeah.
And so, we've seen kind of like, like the gamut of skills and what's actually needed for the industry. So 5 things here that everybody should keep in mind. And it's pretty interesting. It's like none of this is like hey, you just do the technical things or not do the technical things. It is across the spectrum. And the 5 things here, one is make sure you master core technical skills. And these, I will go into like every single one of these in the later slides in a little bit more detail. But just remember, like that's one point where we expect technical skills to be the baseline. So unless you're like super technical, excels greatly at a certain skill sets that's rare in the market. For the most part, we expect everybody to pass certain baseline, and that's about it. Like we don't nobody expects people to code a decoder transformer with self attention on the spot during interviews. Nobody does that unless you're in the LLM field, obviously. And then the second one is communication. Communicate with clarity. So this is extremely important where it's not just about kind of like, hey, I'm here to do data work, so I don't need to speak too much. On the contrast, we actually speak to probably the most amount of people in our profession. And these could range from people who are technical, so like engineers, other data function partners, or it could be completely non-technical, product managers, marketing people. So it's very important that you have communication down to as good as you can. And obviously there's a lot of resources out there, and we'll show a few on our podcast as well that you guys can check out. The third one, this is probably harder to start while you're still in school, but make sure that in whatever, for example, like internships or different projects that you do, you try to understand the acumen behind kind of like the why and the what of the problem. So not just like solving for a particular problem that you're given, but understand why that problem is needed in the first place. So this is what's called business acumen. Essentially, like, hey, you have the business sense to know how to solve a problem, what is the question behind the question, and so on and so forth. And again, we'll get a little bit more into that as well. Embrace continuous learning. So this one is actually pretty important, especially in today's age of AI, where like things evolve so quickly. And through the different guests that we've talked to, the consensus is like one of our episodes, Yu Zhang, talked about this. That's really that really deeply resonated with us, which is AI is still pretty early in its adoption. So especially from like professionals. So there's like 10 to 18 months sort of like arbitrage for people who, if they are really good at using AI in the practical sense of like helping them do the job well, then they're probably pretty ahead for the next year or so. So that's part of the mindset that's really important in today's world, where even if you've done the job or you've worked for a while, like keeping up with the trend is really important. And again, by keeping up with this trend, not coding transformers. And then finally, it's taking initiative. So having an ownership mindset, meaning like when you are tasked with a problem, or when you approach certain problem sets or certain tasks at work or in school, you don't just be like, oh, I'm done here. Like like my job is done. Like go figure out what you want to do with it. Like take an ownership mindset. Like understand, okay, what is this going to be used for, and so on and so forth. So just go that extra mile. That is extremely helpful for people who are being separated from the pack of more average athletes. Cool. Makes sense. All right. Cool. So, master, we're gonna go one slide at a time for those 5 points, and then we'll go get into like Q&A and stuff. If you guys have more questions. Okay, cool. So first one on the list, master 4 technical skills. So a few things that's really prevalent in the industry. One is SQL. Period. Like you need to know that. You need to be really, really, really good at that. If you feel like you're good at it, go further. Because chances are, like you could be better. That's one of the things with SQL where it looks and feels simple, but once you start getting into it, there's a ton of nuances.
So I can actually add to that. So SQL interviews, like if you look at like data science interviews, it's one of the interviews along with Python and other things, right? So many friends, even now, 10 years of experience, they're like, hey, I do SQL every single day. That's what they do in their work. So I don't have to prepare. Probably they prepare for like a year or two when their thing gets good. And there are jobs out there that expect you to do really complicated SQL for problems fully done in 30 minutes while explaining what you did. I'll tell you what the problem comes up to. Could you solve the problem? Yes, you can. But could you do it in that time with that pressure, with that intensity? Maybe not. Only if you practice and get it like so, like probably as a thing, if you have an interview coming up, an hour a day, and making sure you have 4-minute timer, 5-minute timer. I need to get this done in this timer. So that is the SQL practice if you're talking about basic SQL. Knowing it, able to solve it is not the bar. The bar is really high. And it actually helps you, even if the worst or the good thing that could happen is you end up doing it really fast. And that's going to be a very plus time when you get the interviews done. These people just solve it like in half the time or 60% of the time, right?
Yeah, so totally. So just jot that down. Like be really freaking good at SQL. That's number one. Number two, concepts around statistics. So statistics and probabilities, things around, think of it as like your foundational skills. So like the many times we do have to, again, because of the people that we work with, like product managers, marketers, folks that don't understand much about statistics. Imagine you have to explain p-value to them, explain why this is statistically not significant and what does that actually mean. When they're like, hey, it looks like I have a like 20% win on my hand. You have to be able to, you have to be very comfortable, number one, such that you can explain those things very easily. And what we've seen is people who are not super solid in those foundations struggle a lot when it comes down to making it simple for other people who don't know that. So just make sure like baseline levels of things around probability, statistics, stuff like that, you have it down to like muscle memory. And then the third one here is coding, and by coding, it's like if we were to recommend 2 languages for people, it's Python and probably R. More R. Sorry, it's been a while.
You like R.
Yeah,
There's so
I'm
many
biased
people that
'cause,
still love R that talk about R, but Python is good. But if you know R, you could.
Yeah, so like that's pretty prevalent. I read a stats that says like all the open listing of open openings out there, 86% or 90% of them have like Python as a requirement. So just make sure you know that language. Yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering, do you know if like with more data science jobs, do they ask you to do like coding things that are more ski like? So like being able to recode up like a data structure, like is that as prevalent in data science interviews? I feel like that's
I
more.
think when I was looking at it, I was thinking of that actually. The type of roles in data science. Probably that could be. We could probably talk about it again. I could talk about it now. Maybe we talk about it now. Yeah. Cool. So data science or data, like it's a fairly newer field in compared to software engineering, right? and it's evolving. Now we never know in 5 years what it's going to be. But I can talk about right now the type of data science jobs that are out there, right? So data science today is, I would say, three styles. One is product analytics. The second one is more data science full stack. And the third one is more like research scientist. These are the things that you will find yourself when you look for data science. There are neighbor jobs there, like we call our YouTube podcast a data neighbor for that reason. That what are the neighborhood around these data science jobs? There's something called analytics engineering. It's a pretty newly evolving like role per se. And there's on the other side, there's ML engineering, right? And there's somewhere in between, you'll see software engineering data and things like that, right? So if you look at this as like a workflow, what happens? Every day you use Instagram, you use all these. There's data getting collected, logged every day. Someone needs to go pull that data and make it in a data pipeline so that all different professions or different roles could access it. That's majorly data engineering. So sorry, I didn't call it out. Data engineering, a huge one, right? These data engineering people that majorly software engineering background who come into data, but there are people who do data science and who have some software background, they go into data engineering too. That's a lot of, so it depends on what your core skills are and what you choose to be. So that's data engineering. As soon as data engineering does the pipelines and gets it to a state where people can access it, then multiple roles start opening up. There's analytics engineering who takes this data, makes sure they add business logic to it, like what does this mean for business? What are the metrics that business wants to track? Do we do dashboards? Do we do self-serve tools where people can go in and type and get what they want? So that's analytics engineering, right? There's less of predictive modeling there. There's more of reporting. There's more of business logic. Also, Python's needed because you do build pipelines, but not as core as data engineering. Data engineering does a lot of core data pipeline work, and these two are top data pipeline work to the business. And now comes data science product. Data science product works with product managers, engineering managers, engineers, designers, EPD, we call it, like engineering product design, and they help build, understand what should the product look like in the future. They test A, they test B, and see what do we go after. Do we change the login page? Maybe continue with Facebook does not make sense anymore. Just remove that and just have continue with Google. So they test that before they remove it. And that's product experimentation. That's where statistics come in, p-values come in, and all of that. So product analytics is not all companies have this. Meta, there are a few companies that have pioneered this and everyone else follows through because big tech did it. So that's data science product for you. There's a lot of SQL and Python there. There, what you asked about, the Python related SWE roles are not asked as much. It's majorly SQL, majorly pandas, Python. The communication is very important because you deal with lots of stakeholders. Knowing business acumen, metrics, knowing what does success look like is important there, right? And then there is data science full stack where you also do modeling, but the modeling work is more batch modeling, less of actual production modeling where you do real time stuff, right? So you do need to know some part of you do get interviewed on algorithms and other things like lead code stuff a little bit, but you're not expected to do like SWE level interviews there. And then there is applied science, research science. The more you go closer to productionized modeling, the more is the expectation of you to do as software engineering level things. And you get actual lead code interviews and you get system design interviews and all come through. Research scientists and then applied scientists and then comes ML engineering. So this is the all different type of roles you deal with. Yeah.
The line between all of these is really fuzzy. Like when you look for job openings, they probably just have one title, like data scientist, and that's probably about it. So one recommendation could be like, hey, what this, like you can read through the descriptions and stuff. It's probably pretty generic, but like you can always ask the recruiter or whoever about like, hey, what is this geared towards more of? Like, do you do more reporting? Do you work with product a lot more? What is it? So those are like it's evolving so quickly that like Shravya said, probably 5 years, all these lines will like go must be different. Cool. And yeah, definitely. So we have we interviewed many guests on our podcast, and the specific ones that you can learn more kind of like the practical insider information from would be episode 4 and episode 13 with Don Chu, who was an ex-Meta data scientist, and Yu Zheng, who's a staff data scientist currently at Statsig.
Another thing I want to mention is that especially now that you're, graduating and you graduate soon, it does not entirely matter the first role you get, because whatever you get, you could find paths to go into what you want to get to, right? Because we might today think we like this, or this is probably the most needed right now. Maybe I should get there, right? And then aim for that and probably miss out chances on the other roles you might get access to today, right? If you're already good at that space. So, in fact, the Dawn Chu ones, she's a data science major. She does data, like bachelor's, but she wanted to get into data scientist. She actually had an internship at Meta. I think that's what was the story. She had an internship as a data scientist at Meta, but she couldn't get a full-time job there. And she talks about what she did wrong as an intern and why she couldn't get it. And she ended up being a quant analyst, and then a data analyst, and then a business analyst, and then moved up to data science again, got into Meta. But she had like 6 years from her internship to getting back to data science at Meta. So she talks about, like, wherever you are, you could actually work on areas that make you get the next shift and the next shift and the next shift. So, and probably that's a good way too, because you'll understand what you really like, what you're really good at, and end up there.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, so definitely check these out. Inspiring stories, especially. Okay, cool. So the second point on our list is communicate with clarity. I think this is kind of self-explanatory, but I think a few things worth highlighting. Like kind of like the converse, right? Like who doesn't want to communicate with clarity? The interesting part is it's actually really, really hard to do, and like especially when you're dealing with data and technical things, and then you have to explain it to non-technical audience, or even technical audience that doesn't have the specializations that you have, or the instant knowledge of certain data science skills that you took. So make sure you are you at every point possible, just practice effective communication. And the second piece is data storytelling. So a lot of times, in order for the work that you do to be impactful, and impact is a very important topic as well. We're not going to dive into it here, but you can imagine a business or a company hires you guys to just do one thing, which is to help the business or the company grow. That's it. Like nothing else. They're not there to hire you to do data work. They're not there to have problem sets for you or data for you to play around with. That's not the point. The point for them is they expect some return from that investment. And so how do you get that return, or how do they get that return, and how do you actually present that return for them? You try to identify certain things that might be of value to the company, and then you try to influence people who have the ability to actually implement that. And that's kind of like, the thing that you have at your disposal is, I have insights, I have production models, I have this and I have that. Now I need to make sure everyone is on board to actually try this out, and if it works, there's my value. So you need to do a lot of storytelling and convincing of people and companies and businesses. And so that is really valuable in telling compelling stories to people such that things get done. And we actually have an episode specifically around that from Josh Stormer. You guys know who he is, StatQuest. Probably all of you have seen a video or two from him. He gave a masterclass in our podcast on how he does storytelling that makes his videos so engaging. So definitely check that out. And then last point here, audience adaptation. So just make sure that just like you would speak differently to your parents versus to your classmates, to your teacher, to like everyone else, you need to adapt your communication style at business setting as well, based on what they know, who they are, and your relationships with them. So check these out in terms of the different episodes. these guests dive really deep into how you can actually do that. And you don't have time to obviously go through every single one of those here.
Yeah, we keep saying guests, but both Hai and I also deal with this every single day in our professional life. So we add a thumb too. So to add to this, I can give you like a small example. When I was an intern at Microsoft, we worked on an internship for about like 3 months, 4 months, and we get to present our work at the end. I could have made a 50-page deck or like a 100-page deck to show guys have done this, and this, and this. So my manager was for some reason was a director, and she was set up like 2.5 hour slot with me to make sure she goes through my deck because it's my final presentation that says if I get a yes for my full time offer or no, right? So and then she sets up the 2.5 hour meeting, and I was thinking through this. I only have some time. What do I do? So I made a 5-page deck, and I got everything together. I made like a story and things like that. And I went to her, it was a Friday afternoon, and she was like, "Where's the deck?" I said, "This is the 5 pages." Then she was like, "I thought you'd come up with a 50 or 100-page deck, and I'll have to sit with you to get to 5 pages. And that's the reason I booked 2.5 hours to sit with you." And I got this nugget from seniors, from my alumni about this. And I thought about it and I worked on it. And she was like, "That was one reason why I thought you are good for full time, because I don't have to spend time with you to make sure that you're doing work that pertains to the audience." I didn't know that it was that important. Like, I really did not know. It was, maybe purely luck or just some advice or just some thinking that I did. And so just wanted to share with you like how important it was to communicate the right level to the right audience. And
Yeah, totally. And Shravya brought up a good point. So we have our we all both of us. Obviously, we know all of these, but we're presenting it in a way that's kind of like, hey, we also talk to a lot of people, so it's not just our own thing. So this we're and during Q and A's, we're gonna draw from our own experience to answer whatever questions you guys might have. All right, moving right along. Okay, so the third one third or fourth is around business acumen. So just make sure you jot this keyword down. So like just building your business intuitions is extremely important, and be curious about it. So I think when I first started in the data field, I didn't care for what the question behind the question is, for example. I just care, hey, this is my task that I need to do today, and I need to complete it within this time frame. But you know what the most effective sort of goal turn out to be? They're the ones that actually push the boundary. Or, hey, does this even make sense given the business circumstances, what the product looks like, that kind of stuff. So that sort of mentality or that understanding, and we call it domain knowledge as well, is extremely important, especially as you progress in your career or transition from school to business to the profession that you are a part of. So just make sure you always understand business context. So this could be from your internships, this could be from even when you read a newspaper or something, understand what they're trying to say and why they're saying that. That is extremely important. And then through that, then you can start to understand kind of hey, how do I steer my work to actually align with that? So I guess they call it strategic alignment here. How do I align my work to the underlying business context / problem statements that they're really trying to solve? And through that, you're going to be a lot more impactful in your ultimate delivery of that thing. And then, through that, then you create value. We kind of, talked a little bit about that businesses are expecting every one of us to create value for the company. And that's why we're paid to do the work that we do. Let's see. So, again, some episodes to check out. Episode 2 is actually Shravya and I. We just talk to each other about what impact is actually and how do you actually qualify it. So I think that's just our bias. That's episode. All of them. That's just how
should have this recorded in that show.
Yeah. yeah, and we have people from Google, from Coinbase. The Coinbase episode is coming up probably next week. But they get a lot into they get a lot deeper into how to do it and what it actually looks like.
So one, we talked about this in our podcast too, but how do you do it as a student? Like you don't know much, you don't have much idea about businesses right now. It's through our lecturers, probably you do it. They say back in the day when I studied, at least not. So I'd love for you all, to, whenever you get time, read through blogs of all cutting edge like technology companies. DoorDash is a great data blog. Meta has a great data blog. Like all the companies have great data blog. Look through the business problem they're trying to solve, how they solved it, and how could, when you get into interviews with them, right? When they ask you a question, try to go beyond the question. If they ask you a question, solve this. You could write it, and probably when you write it, you talk about, hey, I know you're solving this, and probably do this as well if this is what the question means. Just a statement here and there shows to the interviewer that, oh, this person's thinking through, not just answering, right? Because who are you competing with? You're competing with all the people who are probably technically, good. They already know SQL, they already know Python. How do you bring in what you know? What are you thinking extra than other person? So these are the things where we see when we did interviews, that these are the extra things that show up as sparks, like, oh, probably this person's really good because of this sort of thing. Yeah.
All right, so cool. The last two should be quick. This one we kind of touched upon it during the summary slide. Embrace continuous learning, especially in this day and age with AI. So AI is the future, and I put an asterisk here precisely because what I said is you don't need to know how to code it. You don't need to know like the code behind self-attention, transformers, or anything like that. But you need to be very comfortable using it. And you need to understand how that could help you in your day-to-day life. Now, what I recommend and what we recommend to people is that you need to first build your foundational knowledge first, meaning like, don't go straight to a calculator before you know how to add or subtract. Like that's kind of like the thing. So, like if you're not as comfortable with SQL, you're not as comfortable with certain statistics concepts and things, it's perfectly fine to use AI as your learning assistant, sort of like tutor or capacities like that. But it's very easy to just ask it to give you the right answer, and that kind of defeats the purpose because at the end of the day, the foundation is actually makes us understand deeply what we can bring to the business. So similar to like hey, if I don't know how to do multiplication and I always have a calculator with me, guess what? In a business setting, probably a CEO could come by your desk and ask you a very, like multiplication related question, and you need to answer it on the spot. And if you're not good at it, you can't just be like, hey, let me grab my calculator. And what was it again? So it's really important to understand kind of like that. Even though that's the future, just make sure you are using it in a way that's that adds to your superpower.
Even if maybe the CEO is not coming to you and asking for the multiplication, it could also be you might not need the calculator for multiplication. You might need it for division. Or not a good example, but what you're going after with AI, maybe the answer it's giving you might not be the answer you're looking for. If you know the concept, you'll know that it could have probably been a different answer. If you prompt it differently, then you'd get the answer that you actually want. But if you didn't know what to ask for, you'll just take its answer to the reality and just be okay with this first answer. Most probably, you'll have to keep probing it to get to the right place. So you don't have to do the actual work, which is great with AI, but you need to know what to ask for. For that, you need to know the content and actual subject.
Yeah, and I should give one more disclaimer here. If you are set to on a path to be like an LM engineer, for example, like an AI engineer, like work deeply into AI systems and whatnot, like then by all means, like please like understand how to code everything, like transformers, self-attention, things like that. But for like if you're more into business or if you're less into tweaking the things underneath the hood, you're probably okay. Yeah.
Do you feel like people who are skeptical of AI and outputs will be further behind those who are more willing to embrace it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, do we think people who are skeptical about AI will be left behind effectively, right? Like over time? Yes, absolutely. Episode 13, which we actually put it here, is once you've listened through it or watched through it, you understand why that's the case. And the concrete example, and we tested it, well, I tested it from our guest, Yu Zheng, was like, hey, AI could do so much. You can code any sort of applications with no software engineering background or deployment background experience or anything, and you can have AI do that for you. Guess what? After that interview, I did it. No coding experience. Took me 2 hours to mostly to set up my environment, but it coded me a Super Mario game. I didn't know anything about hardware. I didn't know anything about gameplay systems, software engineering, deploying to Firebase or anything like that. It took me 1 hour. 1 hour to prompt AI to actually do that end to end. It's crazy. So again, to answer the question, like if you keep up with the trends in that space and like not coding it, but like just practically understand how to use it as a tool, you'll be very much ahead in the next 10 to 18 months. And then if you don't, then for sure it's going to be a huge gap that you have to catch up with.
To add to that, very funnily, I was asking Vijay too. So he worked at Amazon Meta before, so guest, and I have my team and my friends, right? So I asked the folk, how many of you use AI for non-coding, for like regular, how much of you? So many people who still say they prefer not to because either, oh, it gives me something I have to work so much to get, to prompt, where I'd rather go do it myself, things like that. And I was like, work with it to make sure that you get it done faster, right? Because you have to prompt it enough to get it done faster. So there's so many people who don't do it, even working in big tech today. So imagine if you already are, pretty good at it by how to actually talk to the AI. Like what is the type of prompt that works? Or what is it good at? What is it not good at? What is Claude good at? What is ChatGPT not good at? And things like that. If you already have some then you'll have advantage for sure. And like I said, the advantage might not last for a long time.
But if you don't take advantage of it, then the gap will be widened. And I think episode 11 here, Ashwarya left us a really cool quote, which is talking to computers, talking to LLMs is just like talking to your colleagues. Like, if you're a CEO, you talk to them differently. If they are from some other functions, you talk to them differently. No difference with AI systems. It's just a way to talk to them that makes it do what you want them to. Okay, cool. Last point here, demonstrate leadership. So taking ownership, that's the first part. That typically sets apart really awesome candidates from the ones that are mediocre. So what do I mean by that? So like if you're given a task, can you calculate me like the year-on-year growth rate of a certain metric? And you're like, okay, yeah, cool. And then you just spit out a number and like, hey, here you go, I'm done. That's you've done the work, but that's not quite taking ownership. Taking ownership means, hey, I calculated this thing. It looks like the number is a little bit surprising. Let me see why that is the case. Let me try to understand what I can do a little bit more to add color, to add context, to make sure I can quantify it in a way that's like, hey, is this good? Is this bad? Like you understand the question or why you were asked about this in the first place. So like that's kind of like the ownership mentality of you were not prompted, but you're still building extra mile. So that's a quality that's super important, and that's a learned capability, learned traits. Meaning like we don't ever start with that as our innate state, but then the more that you practice it, the more it becomes just your natural interaction.
So this is something that will help you when you come to the job, right? But how do you showcase it to get a job? Can you think of something within your school, within your neighborhood, something that you led, something that you started, something that actually led to impact, and probably add that as your other hobbies, activities, or something that you could add in your maybe LinkedIn. I'm a representative, I am a lead of this analytics club, of this ML club, things like that. That shows that you already started demonstrating. You are an owner, you have that mindset that you're different, that you have a profile that's slightly different than all that sort of a thing.
Yeah. And then the second one is mentorship. So one thing that I take to heart is the when you truly understand something is when you can teach it to others. So like again, back to the point about get really, really good at, for example, like SQL. If you can actually teach others what you know comfortably, then you probably know it really, really well. And so this is like the encouragement that's we give as well as our guests give is like trying to mentor people as you become senior in the space, as you become the main subject experts in whatever you're doing, even while you're in school, while you have your job, and so just always shoot for that. Meaning like, hey, I want to get to that level of mastery with certain subjects that you're dealing with right now, and that's a good point to keep in mind. And then lastly, it's leadership. Leadership just means it's not as like grand as leading a company to $400 billion market cap. Like that's not the point. The point really is, hey, how do I add value here? So even if like you maybe in your first meeting with a bunch of senior people, when you can feel like, hey, I'm happy to take notes for everybody. So you guys can have your conversations. I'll just listen in, I'll take notes, and I'll summarize it for you. And chances are, just by doing that, you are more attentive to the meeting. You think more strategically about what you want to write down, what you don't want to write down, and you understand the business more because you're now focusing literally on what people are saying instead of building up or figuring out what those super easy to develop. Cool. Yeah. Again, some episodes here to check out. And anything to add? I think that's the last.
Okay, good enough. And I'll add something around. So there's this one thing that probably covers under mentorship. It's something called networking. Or you might have heard it maybe 100 times already, maybe for 101 time, hear it from me again. All the people that are sitting here 10 years from now, you might need them to refer you for a company that they'll be at some point, right? I didn't know this when I was graduating. There was so I didn't understand the importance of alumni. I didn't understand the importance of my classmates. I didn't understand the importance of my people who were around me. Like I could have leveraged that even more if I go back and tell that, from 10 years ago when I was doing my master's. So basically making sure that so what I'm talking about is people who have access to physically, like right now, right? What about people on LinkedIn? What about people like when you meet them in a conference? What about people when you present a paper, you go present a paper, you get selected, you're talking to people? Like all of this is going to be extremely important on how successful you'll be from now on. And this is not something for getting a job, even when you are at a job, right? Making sure you have this habit of talking to colleagues around you, talking to people outside your company, within the company, just the habit of making sure you network with people. It's going to just help you be better at your jobs. Make sure you understand, what am I doing? Am I getting paid fairly? Am I, so many things you're going to get an understanding when you network more, right? So that's another very important. So we have this episode with Meta MLE called Karthik. This was how to be an MLE. So he was doing his bachelor's in India, and he had his alumni reach out to professors here and do some work. He was computer science grad, and he had a lot of networking effect going on for him to do the ML work, to learn ML and come to US and actually land a job as mentor. Like all of that was purely through networking and talking to people and being uncomfortable. I think that's another thing. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Right now, in this setting, I'd probably sit like in my office and do that meeting or something. This is not that comfortable for me to come here and talk to you guys, right? So putting yourself out there, making sure you have some discomfort, some like time and again, will definitely help you be on a better path. Yeah.
Good. And this is our last slide. Again, the QR code up there. If you guys want to subscribe, we highly recommend it. And back to this gentleman's question initially. What if people are skeptical of AI? This whole presentation was done through a one click. Like I didn't do anything other than generate presentation. And the content that gets fed into that comes from another AI system, Gemini. Who knows what Gemini is? What have used it? So Notebook LM probably heard it. I just fed every single one of our episodes through Notebook LM and tell it, hey, we're here to give a talk to you guys, give you something. It gave it some context for what it's about, who you guys are, and then it gave me everything that I need. Put it in Gamma. Gamma's the presentation AI, and this is it. So you don't believe in the power of AI. It is no joke. Cool, that's it. So I think if you guys have any questions, we are happy to answer anything that you have.
Thank you so much for the talk. My name is Nick. I think you guys did a really good job of expressing what it takes to kind of stand out. Once you have an interview, maybe, what are some tips you could give to get there in the first place? Reaching out to recruiters or applying in that sense.
Do we need to accelerate that episode?
We probably need to.
you-
So we have an episode, entire 1 hour with Karun. He apparently talked to 2,000 mentors in the last 2-3 years, and he has stats on the number of people you need to invite on LinkedIn every week, and how many messages to send them, how you send them, and the expectation of the number of invites to messages to referral to finally getting a call. He had stats on all of that and discussed through every detail. And both of us were flabbergasted, what the hell? How do you know all of this, Karun? So he knows all that information. So I could give a brief right now, and they probably, if you're subscribed, you'll see it yourself. If not, we can send it to and him, and he could send it over to you guys. So how do you get there is networking. Is a simple one-word answer, but the more complicated, slightly longer answer is trying to make sure you get 2-3 different ways, like initial connections. So it's number one, figuring out you actually researched what role are you applying to, how many companies, who are part of those companies. Do you know someone who knows someone who knows someone in those companies, right? Again, to physical connection. Make sure you don't the discomfort of asking someone. And it's pretty hard, but forgetting about that until getting there. And that's one way if you know people. If you don't know people, sending an email, sending a message, but making sure you also should talk about value, what you'll bring in, and also provide some value to the person. We actually talk about in Gene Tapat's podcast. He's a senior director in Instacart, and he talks about he apparently had a job out there, and he posted on LinkedIn, guys, I'm hiring for a data scientist. It's actually a junior level data scientist, and apparently one person. There's so many people who pinged him, but one person pinged him about a grammatical mistake or a mistake on the job application. Job listing, I think. And he just stood out. For him, he apparently sent his profile directly to a recruiter. I mean, he obviously said he's good at it and all that stuff, but he was pretty simple, and he also gave value. So making sure you think about some way of what value can you give to the person, right? It might feel like I'm just a student, I don't have maybe experience. If you didn't have experience, what can I give in? But imagine you're messaging to a startup, or 100-employee company. What they'll be looking for? They'll be looking for customer feedback. No one uses the product as much because they're still trying to find product market fit. Imagine you use the product and you give, guys, I love your product, or I didn't like your product because of this, and this. I can come help you make it better. It's as simple as that. So think of ways of how you can make that message better when you send the messages. But for more detail, please definitely listen to the podcast. It is pretty good. It'll probably come in like a week or two. We actually were taking 3 weeks from now. But maybe you will probably push earlier, huh?
Yeah, we'll get it earlier. And one thing to just keep in mind is really tough market right now. Like, just acknowledge that that's the case. You've heard of tech companies laying people off left and right. So it's really competitive. But again, like you guys are all data science students, so you understand. I think the power of data is how much you right. So you're not saying like it's just staying wise much jobs or whatever. You can be strategic about it, but at the end of the day, most likely a rejection is inevitable because of what it is, and just don't get served by it.
Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you for the talk. My name is Luke. So, a lot of these skills you mentioned are things that are going to be directly tested in the interview process itself. But some of these things, like business acumen and the last topic we were talking about, those aren't necessarily things that they're going to question you on. So, do you have any advice on how you can display those qualities in an interview?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what happens if people don't ask you specifically about those and how you actually understand it? So believe it or not, we actually assess those things without actually asking you a specific question about it. So, like if in an interview, you it's time for you to ask a question. For example, like after 40 minutes of being grilled, unfortunately, the last 5 minutes typically is like, hey, do you have any questions for me? Or what other questions do you have? Right? Like if what you say is, "Oh, I don't have any," that's a automatic disqualifier. If you're not curious about this company, you're not curious about the role, you have absolute zero question, that's impossible. A better question could be, and then since some people would have very generic questions when they get it, like, "Oh, what is the career path?" or whatever. Like those are legitimate in many cases, but like most of we can tell, and it's like just something on ChatGPT, for example. A more thoughtful question related to what Fabio gave as an example could be, hey, I saw that you guys last year started declining in revenue. What are you doing about it? Or like, what was the story behind it? How is your team getting involved in that? Do you get pressure because of it? Like these are stuff that is the next layer onion peel where you can actually it's a perfectly legitimate question, and it shows that you number one tons of research about a company. Number two, hide the fact that hey, this team actually works pretty closely with this sort of problem space, and so here's something that I'm curious about, and I'm not afraid to ask about it. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
This is kind of a goofy question, but you talk about business acumen and kind of explaining a lot of your work through clarity. When you want to practice maybe outside of the bubble, because I know data scientists would be among other data scientists, maybe they'll understand the concept more clearly because they've seen it before. Who do you talk to when you want to be like, you don't know nothing about this, and I want you to see like if you know what I'm talking about? Just talking to friends, family, or who do you go to?
So you're basically asking about how do we make sure we talk with clarity and ensure that you communicate your business acumen as part of that. So what I just did just now was I did that, right? So you asked, you basically, I'm actually, by the way, I'm actually pretty bad at communicating with clarity myself. Very bad long before, getting better by the day. I'm working on it myself. I work on it like this. As soon as I hear someone, they tell me a story. It could be even a movie story that your friends talking to. Then how do you concise their 1 minute in 10 seconds? It's something that, but make sure you have the essence of it covered, right? So that's the communication piece. There's a business acumen piece that you spoke about, which I would say comes from more of you understanding how businesses work. What is important for for someone to succeed. It could be a coffee shop, so it could be like Starbucks, it could be to like DoorDash and Meta, etc. Right? And the more you read about it, the more you listen to podcasts, the more you understand, the more you get a hang of how our business is working and what's happening. And you combine that with your work on clarity and communication, that would be like a great combination.
And I'll give you I'll paraphrase what Josh Slaughter said, which is the 3 steps to make his videos really effective. Number 1, make sure you focus on the main ideas. So whatever you're trying to tell people, communicate with people, you need to get back to understanding things at the foundation level. You're comfortable with it, that you can know this is the main idea of what I'm doing, what I'm communicating, and that's it. Don't go beyond that. The detail doesn't matter. 2, don't have too many main ideas. So Josh's triple bam thing, like bam, double bam, triple bam. There's no triple bam. There's a reason for it, because otherwise that would be way too many ideas. Too many people would not understand or can't keep track. So those are 2, and then the third one is use examples that your audience understands. So if I were to talk to my mom about a business, then I probably need to make sure that it is something that she's familiar with, which could be a grocery store. So imagine going to a grocery store. This is how it works. And when you talk to somebody else in other professions like healthcare and stuff, maybe use like a calling your patients as an example instead of the actual data or statistics. So yeah, so those are facts. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask a quick question about interview prep sort of stuff. A lot of us, I think, are starting to do some personal projects or have been to give like talking points on interviews. And obviously, those are really good learning opportunities for just all sorts of topics that you like maybe not know much about. But I want to ask if maybe you're more interested in a specific field, how much into a personal project should you go to kind of dive into that without maybe in our position, entering without seeming too niche and like putting ourselves in a box too much versus like being more broad about it. Like what's the balance of that?
So I think we discussed this in our podcast with Karan too, where we talk about breadth and depth, right? So breadth is where you showcase that, you could take up any domain and get into the domain. And there's depth, where that's what you're talking about. Like there's an area that I'm pretty passionate about and you could basically solve any problem there with the tools that could be transferable to other areas, right? Ideally, it'd be great to showcase because you've been long enough, bachelor's, master's, combining, you could show some breadth and one depth, right? So today's world, apparently, this is what we are hearing more and more is that depth matters and understanding, let's say it's groceries, which area are you more passionate about? You have a project around that and you solve the problem in a deep level, that's going to help you land a job in that area for sure. Right? But that doesn't mean you only have something for that. Also talk about it when you apply for a non-grocery company, let's say, and your project was in groceries, right? How do you talk about the same project that the application, the execution of the project can be applied to other areas too? You could talk about the methods you used, might not be the domain as much, right? So depth is definitely very good, but also make sure that you cover in your resume the aspects of breadth so that can make you relevant for other the teacher that you're talking about outside as well. And it'll be great if you can choose the depth area, something that already has a lot of companies that are trying to solve that problem, so that you already have a good parent to start with. Like you can go to that companies or some area that you get a job.
So this will be the last question, and then we will go to the personal Q&A, which everybody loves to line up for afterwards. So what advice do you have for international students, given that the market has become harder and harder and harder for them to compete? For instance, applying directly on a website versus getting a referral. Like, what have you seen work best for the international community?
Yeah, like you talk about especially with visa expiring and you need to get a job within a certain time span. I have talked to many, graduates around that too. So probably what we spoke about around the LinkedIn messaging and making sure you put yourself out there, especially if you're in a set with so many links around, right? Having a balance of what the project that you're working on, building a good portfolio so that you have something to talk to when you meet someone. How do you talk to them? What do you bring up that you've already done something, right? And ensuring that you get some entry. Do not have limitations on the entry as much, especially because there's visa issues and other things. So, like we spoke about Dawn Chu, she actually had an internship at Meta, but she ended up not getting a full time. So she joined I think she joined quantitative analyst or even business analyst. For data science, if you are a student in data science, there are some folk, I'm not sure if everyone, but they think business analyst is not a job I want to get to because it's purely reporting Excel maybe, and I don't want to do that work. It's not my, that I learn modeling, I could do, all of this. Why would I go just crunch some numbers in Excel? Probably there's this thinking that I've seen, especially in some people when I'm mentoring, do not have that thinking to just start somewhere. When you start somewhere, you get your visa, you get, the foundation, you could always build up to where you want to get to, right? But that doesn't mean to not dream or to not apply for the other things, but don't get too, stuck to one area. This one advancements.